Ready, Dom?
All right.
In just a second.
Ready?
Just a second. All right, go for it.
Okay. Hello. Welcome to the Biotic Live Show. I'm Dominic, your host for the moment, and I will be introducing our guest today, John K. Snyder III. And also joining me is Lewis.
Hello.
Luca.
Hello.
Gemma and Jess.
Hi there.
Okay. And the social media links for our store for us and John will be on screen for a moment. And they should be in the Zoom group chat. On the left, you'll see our stuff, and you can visit John at his website, or you can find him on his Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. And I'll get with the first question. I'll have the first question, which is, were you always interested in writing or drawing or as being an artist?
I think so. I mean, I'm told ever since I was a kid, I always liked to draw. I remember always liking to draw, but I always liked trying to tell stories too. Ever since I was a kid, I try to tell, you know, even a drawing on notebook paper, like little cartoons, that sort of thing. And I always liked stories in any form, comics, movies, books, that sort of thing. So I think it's something that's always stuck with me. And then as I got into my late teens, you know, I tried, you know, work, like friends and I would try to do little comics together. And then as I got older and I actually wanted to try to get into comics, I actually got to a point where I had decided, I think it was 20 at the time, where I thought, okay, I want to do like a whole comic. I'm going to come up with my own character, and I'm going to write a story, a 22 page story, I think it was. And I'm going to do everything on it, write it, pencil it, ink it, letter it. And then I'm going to try to send it out to all the different publishers and see how it works out, you know? So it seems to me like I've always had this kind of momentum to try to get into a medium of storytelling. And comics was, to me, the best way, or the way that I felt like I could communicate storytelling the best. So that's a little bit of that there. So,
I have a quick question. Did you go to college? And if so, did you go for writing or art or both?
Well, let's see. I went to George Mason University for about a year and a half. And then during that period, I had kind of a general set of courses. It wasn't specifically an art degree at the time, but I did have some courses that I took that were art, like a life drawing class. I had a design class, and I also had a typography class. And even though I only went for about a year and a half, I got a lot just out of those classes. Typography came in very handy for when I would try, you know, to do my own lettering, like for sound effects or title design, that sort of thing. Life drawing was good. And then the design, my design teacher was really great too, because I feel that comics are very, at least in my work, is, you know, I'm very design oriented. And I learned a lot from my teacher there about just how to approach, you know, arrangement of shapes, like on a comic page or a cover, layout, that sort of thing. So even though it was a brief period of time, it actually came in very helpful. One thing that was really, really helpful to me was I was very fortunate in that time period in my late teens through my early 20s. I worked at a graphic studio in the DC area, and it was all doing like charts and graphs. I mean, it wasn't actually any kind of illustration, but it was all very, very heavy production. It was charts and graphs for various government agencies and such, because it was just outside the DC area. But there was always a very high turnaround, you know, just piles of charts and graphs and all kinds of documents that had to get out in a very short period of time. So that really helped me to learn production. And production is a really important aspect of comics because you're dealing in such a high volume, you know, number of pages and images and all that sort of thing. So that came in really super helpful. And I think that really kind of really supplemented my ability to learn how to make comics in a way that that I may not have been able to get from school. Now I know there's schools now where, you know, the comic teaching is generated toward the the production of pages and such, but at the time, that's what helped me out. So
Yeah.
What all have you worked on in your career? Obviously, fashion and action, which you got right behind you, but what other cool stuff have you been a part of?
A lot of stuff. I worked on a lot of different things. If you'd like, I can show you some of the things I've worked on. We can start getting into that. Would you like me to start? Okay. So the most recent publication I've out is my first hardcover. It's a graphic novel adaptation of mystery writer Lawrence Block's 8 Million Ways to Die novel featuring his character Matthew Scudder. That's the most recent book. This is the Fashion and Action collection, which is a collection of my first comics work, my creator-owned series from when I first started out in 1985. And that was from 85 to 87. And from there, I worked on a number of books, including Suicide Squad back in the 80s. That is I did the layouts. That was my first work starting for DC. I did the layouts initially, so I did the interior. That cover's by Carl Kiesel. But this was one of my covers for Suicide Squad with my pencils and Carl Kiesel's inks. And then I went on to start getting into adaptation stuff for Classics Illustrated, adapted Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and The Secret Agent by Joseph Conrad. And again, this is when I was working in more, we were talking about the design stuff earlier. So this is where I was really getting a chance to get more graphic in some of the work I did. And then I went back to DC and did working with writer Matt Wagner, who I'd worked on Grendel, his series Grendel. We redid the the Golden Age Dr. Midnight character. And that was a painted series. And then I went on from there to work with writer Steve Siegel on the Golden Age Green Lantern character, Alan Scott. And again, getting back to, and a lot of other things in between there, but getting back to my most current project, this. I also did a lot of licensed characters, like trading cards were real popular for a while. I did things with that, like when the Shadow movie first came out, Aliens, like an Aliens related project, and Star Wars related stuff, Star Wars trading card, that sort of thing. So really a lot of across the board projects. So that's just some of the things.
I want to ask, what's your most recent thing about? Detective story, am I right?
Yeah, the Lawrence Block book here, 8 Million Ways to Die. That is it's a series of books by Lawrence Block featuring Detective Matthew Scudder. Matthew Scudder ages in real time. So at this point in his career, it's 1982 is when this book first came out. So I went ahead and kept the setting in 1982 New York, and it's a very involved story, but it's about New York City in 1982. It's about the detective and his personal struggles. It's also about a case that he's working on. So it touches a lot of different points using the detective novel motif. But I found it to be kind of transcendental of all of that. And it was really a great project to work on. And it was really a pleasure. It's been a pleasure to become acquainted with Lawrence through working on this book. But it was really great to work on. I really enjoyed researching like early 1980s New York City. Really got into that quite a bit. So anyway, that's what this is about. A little bit about what that's about there. So.
Okay. Jess, should I let John have the floor, or should I ask a few more questions?
So we actually have a question from Facebook Live. We have Matthew Addix, one of our awesome customers.
Okay.
He's asking, did not completing college ever hurt you in the comic industry, or was your art portfolio much more important than what college you went to?
Could you ask that? Could you state that?
Sure.
Again?
Did not completing college ever hurt you in the comic industry, or was your art portfolio much more important than what college you went to?
Wow, that's a good question. I think it would have been nice to finish college. I mean, I'd recommend finishing college, absolutely. But at the time, that just wasn't the direction I was personally going. I don't feel like it really hurt, but I don't think it necessarily helped either. I think it would have been good to go ahead and finish college, to be honest with you. But at the same time, I don't think it particularly affected, as far as affecting my career. I couldn't really say that it did. But the thing is, that's really good about being in college is that it's, it gives you a sense of completion. And one of the things that's really important about comics is that you work on these large projects, 20, 40, hundreds of pages, depending on the story you work on. So it's a bit of a marathon, so college is kind of good training for that, to be honest with you, regardless of what artistic training you're getting. Just the act of, getting involved with a large scale project that you're finishing. I think it's really good in that sense. But I can also say, at least in my case, I was very fortunate in that a lot of the people that I worked with in comics, like for example, I started out working with Timothy Truman, who had recently graduated from the Kubert School. So, some of the things that he had learned from the Kubert School, he passed on to me, so I kind of learned from him and what he had learned from going to school that was more of a vocational, towards the vocation of comics. There's a lot to be said for learning in the field, but at the same time, I would say that that in the long run, it's been fine how it worked out, but I'm going to say that I was lucky in that sense. So that would be my answer to that. Any other questions or?
You do have a bunch of different styles. You don't really stick to like one form of creating your pieces, really.
Right.
Like what different styles have you tried?
Well, I mean, a lot of times with the work that I've done, I've been involved in a lot of different commercial projects, also outside of comics. So sometimes I've tried to change my style to be more adaptable to the project I'm working on. I think it's kind of cool to be able to have different kind of styles to work in. I felt like when I was working on the Classics Illustrated stuff, for example, I felt like it was kind of cool to go in a hard graphic style for that. But at the same time, actually, let's see if I can find this here. Just going through some of my past work. Really neat project I worked on a few issues of was for DC Comics. I inked a few issues of Justice League Adventures, which was so this is me inking over somebody else's pencils. In this case, the penciler is Rick Burchett, and so he was drawing in this beautiful animated cartoon style. So rather than some of the hard-edged graphic style that I have for some of my other work, in this I was trying to follow Rick's pencils and do this really kind of smooth inking line. And I really like that sort of thing because it's very graphic, but at the same time, it's much more of a very clean, very cartoon animated type of look. So you know, in stark contrast to something like, say, a page from Dr. Midnight, which is, you know, a full painted piece, and, you know, trying to get in all this different action, the hard edge of the graphics and kind of the hard graphic edge style. So I find that it's advantageous for a freelancer to have the ability to have different styles, because it makes you more available for different types of projects. So it's just something that I've always tried to do in my work. So
okay. Jess, any more questions? Or
Yeah, Gemma, do you have a question?
What was your experience at cons like?
um,
When cons and stuff. What's your experience there?
let's see. Well, I mean, it's been really important to me, because that's how I've met people, you know, to work with. You know, I mean, it's been really important. It's really funny. Like I said earlier, you know, I'd sent out that 20-page comic to all the different publishers, and I kind of knew I got a list of publishers, you know, from like I would actually look in the magazines where to send submissions. And I sent it to everybody, Marvel, DC, about 10 different publishers. And I figured I'd probably get rejected, but I wanted to get started, right? So I still have all the rejection letters. I did get 1 or 2 letters back where they wrote back and, you know, actually gave suggestions. A lot of them were form letters. So so the point is that I went to a little convention, and I brought a copy of the comic with me, like, you know, a Xerox copy. And Tim Truman was there, and he had just started out. And I really wasn't that familiar with Tim's work, but I knew that this new company, First Comics, had started up, and they were doing all these independent type comics. And it was the editor at the time, Mike Gold, was there, John Ostrander, who I ended up working with on Suicide Squad, and Tim Truman. And I was just kind of showing it to everybody, and Tim just loved it. And it was just out of the blue. And then we kept in touch. And then within about a year of showing him that at this little tiny convention, I ended up working with him as an apprentice, and then eventually ended up working on Fashion in Action. So in that sense, you know, that was really important to be at the show, and it was really random. You know, it wasn't like something I had figured out. So I think that in that sense, at least during that time period, it was really helpful, because you just never know who you're going to meet. And I think that's what's really great about it is that you can get around a lot of creative people and meet people that you wouldn't meet in any other kind of situation, you know, and it can be very random, you know. It's just it's a great way to meet people. At the Baltimore Comic Show every year, they have a huge artist alley section, and it's just all these different kinds of people with all different kinds of books they're putting out, and it's a great way to meet people just starting out. So anyway, I think it's a great way to. I've met a lot of very dear friends that way through, and great people to work with. You know.
So we got another question here.
Go ahead.
When it comes to character anatomy, what was the hardest part of the body to draw, in your opinion?
Oh, all of it? No, it's funny for me. The hardest part, I always had trouble with feet. Feet always kind of were tough with me, and I always had kind of a difficulty with that. So, and everybody's got something that they get hung up on, you know. But I think that was one that always drove me nuts. It's funny, Frank Frazetta, who's one of my favorite artists. You know, if you look at a lot of his paintings, the characters are standing in mist, you know. But you know, they're just kind of misty and all that. But he drew great feet too. So, anyway, thanks for the question. Thank you. Okay. Next.
We were just joking about that before the show. We were joking about the Men Fog Machine. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, fog machines are great in comics. I use them a lot. Okay. And that's one of the great things about how comics transitioned from, you know, just being able to do line work to actually doing like the full color work, is that you could get into much more atmospheric, you know, impressionistic type of imagery. And it has a certain kind of intensity sometimes you can't get with just line work, you know. So, go ahead. Question?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Luca.
So when you Are there any notable differences, like, from when you got into the comic scene into now? Maybe like what you need to get into the comic industry, if you know like how different it was then versus now.
Well, it's funny. Gemma was asking about my convention experiences, and you asked me about this a little bit ago. And I it's different now because the size. Well, up until recently, the sizes of the shows are so large. I think sometimes that for a younger person starting out, it's a lot more intimidating as to how to get in contact with other artists, when there's so many people at the show. When I was describing that show to you where I met Tim, it was in a high school gym. I mean, it was so small, so there's this kind of intimacy. So it's a little more difficult. I think it's a little more challenging to meet people at a convention in one way. In another way, there's a lot more people that you can meet. So I think that it kind of balances out a little bit there. But it's funny. It's hard for me to say what it was, the difference between now and then, because I think the medium was much more generated toward a certain amount of monthly books, and they needed a certain amount of artists. And I think that there's so much free form publishing now with the number of titles, the graphic novel market, and that the self-publishing market, like Kickstarter, that sort of thing, that I think that it's funny, it's kind of constricted the opportunity on one level and it's kind of expanded it in another. And I think it's put a lot of responsibility into a younger person starting out to kind of create almost their own market in a way that so I think there is some challenges that weren't quite there before, but at the same time, like when I was telling you about that 22-page story I drew on my own and sent out, I would be posting that online now. Like I would have probably set up a website or a blog or whatever and been drawing, like showing the steps like of every page I was drawing, like how, like got this panel today, like a daily diary, and actually tried to create like an audience for myself even before I finished the book, and kind of turned it into this whole kind of project. And then when I was finished with it, might even conceivably do a Kickstarter with it. And even if it didn't raise a lot of money, just raise enough to publish it, So I mean, and that's asking a lot again to take on that kind of responsibility, like as opposed to, meeting a publisher and having a book published, like in the way that I was accustomed to. But at the same time, it offers you a certain amount of freedom, because if you do manage to create your own characters and you get a book done and you're managing to get it printed through on Kickstarter, you've got complete control over that. That's your character, that's your book, and you can do another Kickstarter, And in one sense also, what that does is that will get the attention of established publishers. And even if you don't, sell a lot of the books or anything like that, the fact is that you're showing established publishers that you are creating projects, and they see that you're capable of doing that. So that's another way of getting in that, to work with established publishers that didn't exist in the past. So there are all these different avenues. And I have to be honest with you, I'm still learning and figuring out this stuff myself as well. It seems to be a constantly changing thing. So I hope that helps to answer your question. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Oh, wait, where'd she go?
Question?
Jess, do we have any more questions or?
I think that's it. Sorry, we're kind of fading in and out here.
Okay.
Oh wait, here we go. Alton Simpson, he says, "Is there anything in your career that you would have done differently, knowing what you know now?"
I love that question.
Could you speak on that point, on that question?
It's a funny question, because I think throughout my career I may have asked myself that once or twice, but the longer I get into my career, the less I ask myself that question, if that makes sense. Because what ends up happening is your career is what it is, you know? So it's kind of like, let's say, you know, I made a decision to do something differently. I mean, that could have set off a chain of events that would have led to a different outcome for something else that I'm really happy how, you know, it's hard to say. It's kind of like the movies where they go back and try to change time and then it just messes everything up.
Yeah.
Kind of like that's what it's like, you know. It's really funny. So to be honest with you, I really can't say. It's really hard to answer that in terms of, oh, okay, here's something I would have done differently. You know, I mean, you know, you were asking about college earlier. I think I would like to have finished college. You know, if I think about things like that, but at the same time, I ended up having the career I had and met the people I did and went through the path that I did. So I'm happy with how it turned out, you know. But outside of everything else, I have to be honest with you. I'm really quite happy to be where I am today. So whatever path I led to get to this point, I'm okay with it. So if that helps to answer the question.
I'm sure it does. So we have another question here. Do you prefer digital drawing or ink and paper? Also, okay, so do you prefer digital drawing or ink and paper?
That's a great question. To be honest with you, I'm still mostly traditional in using paint and pencil and paper. Just in the last decade, I've started using Photoshop more, but mostly what I do it for is manipulation of finished images. So like when I was working on 8 Million Ways to Die, I would do like a tight pencil drawing, and then I would combine elements like painted backgrounds or I would alter the contrast, darker, lighter, that sort of thing. So I don't actually physically digitally draw yet. I'm still working with physical type medium. But at the same time, I would like to know, actually, I have been thinking about getting an iPad, and I've actually been asking online about like if people prefer iPads. I've heard about the Apple Pencil that's very popular. Frankly, this is something that I'd love for people. I'd love to get input from people on what they'd suggest, like what the best tablet is, because again, this is something where, you know, I have questions. I'd like to find out more about how people like working digitally. I think that I was a little resistant to it for a period, but I think I'm much more open to it now because it'll, again, getting back to production, I think it allows people to produce a lot more, you know, in terms of story that is kind of that in a way that is more time consuming to do all by hand. So that's a path I'm looking forward to taking more of digitally in the next decade. So thanks for asking. I appreciate it. So.
Okay. Cool.
Okay.
Yes, we seem to be nearing the end of the show.
Okay.
So, okay, Jess, what are we going to do about the wrap up? Oh, where'd you go?
Can I show a few things of something I'm working on right now?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I just wanted to show you real quick. I am currently starting a project. I'm working on a story. It's going to be 50 pages. It's all going to be done in, we were talking about digitally, it's going to be done in pencil and paint, black and white and grays and reds. It's there's like a sneak look at it right there. It's going to be kind of a Victorian era vampire gothic romance type of story set in the mountains of between Russia and Turkey. I'm sorry, that's just a quick look at some of the characters there. But this is a new thing that I'm working on right now.
The Ouroboros cycle?
Yes, and that is by writer, it's a series of books by writer J.D. Faulkson, and those are available currently through Amazon. He's got 5 books in the series right now. These are some of the characters from it. This will be a graphic novel of a portion of from the first book in the series. And it's these characters are going after this particular creature right here, the Scion. So this is something I'm currently working on. So I just wanted to give you a quick look at that. And that I'll have more information on that in the following year, in 2021. So I just want to
We have one last question from, again, Matthew Addix. What was your favorite character to work on?
Passion and action. I mean,
Yay.
I gotta be okay. Here's the thing. I love working. Well, I'm really looking forward to working on. I actually am really loving working on these characters right now.
Yeah,
too.
they look cool.
Yeah, I really am enjoying this. I mean, you know, it's really every new project is like my favorite project. You know, creator-owned stuff is really great. I just always like to say this every time I get a chance to speak to everybody out there that, you know, is interested in doing their own thing, is have your own characters, create your own characters, have your own thing, you know, because that is always something that's all yours, you know, that you can do something with. So I would always, you know, I've always got a fondness for my own creator-owned characters, but I would also like to say to all the young artists out there and everybody who's working at it to keep pursuing your own characters, your own, you know, your own goals and dreams and all that sort of thing, because you know, that's part of what all this is about is, you know, your own sense of creativity and that sense that you have of how to create. You can bring that to other people's creations, and that collaboration is part of what makes you grow as an artist. So, and I just wanted to say thanks to everybody for having me today. I really appreciated that. But I also wanted to say that, you know, all the work that I do is from working with other people. So that's kind of what makes it all work is all the input from all the other creative people. It's, you know, I always feel like we're the sum of the parts of all the people that we work with. And I think that that's one of the great things about, you know, collaboration and being in this field. So just wanted to throw that in there. So.
Okay, well, Jess, if we'll be wrapping up about now, is that about correct?
Yeah, yep, yeah.
Okay, well, Jess, can you display the social media links to everybody? Okay. So you'll be able to find Symbiotic Comic stuff just at on our Facebook, on our Instagram. You'll be able to find John's. You'll be able to find him at johnksnyder.com. You'll be able to find him on his Facebook, John K. Snyder III, his Instagram and Twitter, which are both about the same. Check out his stuff. It's all very neat, even as a commission. Like I saw some of your commission work. It was all very neat.
Oh, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I really like the Dr. Jekyll one.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. That's a personal favorite of mine too. That's a great one. Thank you.
All right.
I enjoyed
Well,
it.
I guess that'll be a goodbye, and this is the end of the show.
Well, thank you so much for hosting me today. I really appreciated it. You know, it's great visiting with you guys. Would love to come back sometime in the future and show you some of the new stuff I'm working on. And you know, best to everybody. I'd also like to thank Amy and Diane Villari, who first introduced me to Amy and everybody. And I just wanted to say thank you all so much. You know, Dom and Luca and Louis and I just and Gemma, thank you all so much for having me today. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, John. Thank you
Thank you,
so
John.
much.
It'll be